This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from Staffordshire branch. Topic of today's event is havening for health and well-being, putting you in a safe place. My name is Bernard Mucha. I am the chair of Staffordshire branch, and I am pleased to welcome everyone to today's event. Thank you for joining us today. Very warm welcome to our guest speaker and presenter for today, Mark Wingfield, who is the director at Max Havening Techniques. Before I introduce Mark a bit further, I would like to welcome our Irish Vice President, Angela Abs. Thank you for joining today, Angela. Great to see you today. And we go through the Zoom housekeeping items first of all. So this event is being recorded. Please keep yourself on mute, and then after the meeting, after the event, we will share the link to the recordings in the due time. You will also receive a event feedback afterwards, so please complete that. This is for our continuous improvement, for revision, see what are the needs of our members and see how the event went. So I will introduce Mark now. So Mark is an expert in supporting people who have experienced traumatic events. He has worked with many industries, such as household name businesses, railways, charities, councils, NHS, to remove and reduce emotional distress. So getting key people happily back to work and performing at their best. So today at our meeting, Mark is going to be given an insight into and demonstrating the havening techniques. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed for that. I'm going to be sharing some slides with you today, but I want this to be very interactive. We're going to have a little bit of an introduction to myself and how I got into havening, and then what havening is about. But then we have a volunteer, and we're going to do a live demonstration of havening because I really want you to see the power of havening. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the research behind havening and how it works. And then you're all going to have a chance to have a go. So we'll do what's called self-havening. And for minor concerns and anxieties, havening is wonderful just to put those to one side and take away the emotional impact that they may have. So I hope that you are going to really benefit from today. You can be as skeptical as you like, by the way, because it might seem a little bit fantastical, some of the things that are claimed of havening. But if you follow the process, if you do what I ask you to do a little bit later on, I'm extremely confident that you'll actually benefit, and it'll make it very much worth your while. And also from a work perspective, I think you'll find it extremely interesting. So I shall crack on and just give you a little bit of an insight as to how I got here, just to pre-frame things. Now, I'm just an ordinary bloke who did a business studies degree some years ago, and as part of that, I speak fluent German because I did some placements in Germany, working for people like Bosch. So I'm used to big industry and some aspects of health and safety of that. Through Bosch, I got into car components, then I got into Monroe, who make shock absorbers. It's all fairly commonplace so far. My position as regional manager in the UK at Monroe was made redundant. So I linked back to my German and I became an export sales manager at JCB. And some years down the line, I then ended up being a product manager at Caterpillar, in between doing a few other things. And that introduced me to something that a lot of you on this call will be familiar with, which is Six Sigma. So I'm a certified Six Sigma black belt, which isn't really what I thought I was going to be doing when I joined Caterpillar. And I'm also a karate black belt. And both of those, you might think, well, what have they got to do with havening and whatsoever? But actually, when I was made redundant from my position at Caterpillar, I took voluntary redundancy because the plant wasn't looking very secure at the time. I developed a new brand and a new business of my own back in 2006 called Max Conflict Management. And I'd had quite a bit of experience helping people with all sorts of different challenging things. So excuse me a second, somebody's requesting remote control of my screen. So I'm going to decline that, I'm afraid. I don't know where that's come from. Anyway, so I got involved in conflict, and it's a particular type of conflict, which I'll go into in a moment. And it really fused together my Six Sigma process understanding, but also my understanding of self-defense and how to help people in difficult situations. And you'll understand in a moment, because we were focused on reducing assaults, particularly violence and aggression with frontline staff. This is at a university, for example, where we're dealing with housekeeping people, security people, people working in the shops, all sorts of different things. We're very successful at that. We reduce assaults very quickly by just training people to be very assertive and how to deal with it with their thinking brain rather than automatically jumping into their fight or flight response. And this is me on a bad day in the red shirt, and I'm challenging this young man. This is actually in prisons from a TV program called Football Behind Bars that we were involved in some years ago. And my colleague Malcolm there is coaching this young man through the intimidation that I'm exposing him to, so that he keeps his cool and doesn't hit me, hopefully. So and it's very interactive stuff. And we also do self-defense. Now, we're not doing any of that today. You might be relieved or possibly disappointed to hear. But what that led me to is I came across a lot of people who had been assaulted, unfortunately. And for those people, sometimes they were too scared to access our training, which is very experiential and very challenging. And one day, somebody who knows me quite well said, you ought to do havening. This was back in 2014. I said, well, I know where havering is, but I've got no idea what havening is. What are you on about? And anyway, cut long story short, it's based on the work of a very clever guy called Dr. Ronald Rudin. And this is the book that his theory is based on.
Oh, sorry, it's going to go next door.
Could we have that mic off, please? Thank you. So the work is based on this theory that Ron exposed back in 2010. But this is the culmination of over a decade's worth of experience and experimentation. Because Ron is he's a neuroscientist. He's the guy on the right-hand side in this picture. On the left-hand side is his twin brother, Stephen. And Ron has been involved. He was actually trained at Harvard. He's a very clever guy, as I mentioned. He's been involved in all sorts of research studies for prestigious universities on the eastern seaboard of the US in various academic circles. And he did his PhD in organic chemistry. He then decided to be a GP. And his brother, Stephen, is a dentist, and they're qualified as doctors in the States as well, known as doctors. So I'm not going to go through all of the theory, you might be relieved to know, but the lovely thing about havening is that you don't have to actually talk about what bothers you. So somebody who's been through PTSD, who has had horrific experiences and really doesn't want to talk about it, quite understandably, they don't have to. Havening will still work. It can be done via Zoom, and I hope I'll prove that to you in a moment. Or it can be over WhatsApp or Skype or whatever is your particular social media poison. Also, it's very fast. Compared to most therapies, it is incredibly fast. And the reason being, because we know where it comes from. This is where Ron's academic experience and understanding and actual practical experience as a GP, this is why it works, because we apply what we know, the actual scientific knowledge. And just to show you that some of the evidence, there have been now 3 major British university research reports that prove the efficacy of havening. This was the first one back in 2015. And a gentleman you might recognize on the right-hand side there is Paul McKenna. Paul McKenna is known as a bit of a self-help guru, famous for his hypnotism show I think in the 90s. But he was actually involved in the first study. And you'll see him there, hopefully on the picture with Ron. He's a very good personal friend of Ron Rudin's. He has quite an integral part to play in the development of havening, which we won't go into today because it's too long a story. But I'm now going to hand over to my friend and colleague, Elena Kindler, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the first two studies. Just something to note about Elena, she is a survivor of 9/11. She was actually at the bottom of one of the towers when the first aeroplane hit back in 2001. She fortunately escaped and survived. But 13 years, I think it was, later, no, 15 years later, she was unfortunately in a train crash. And so she has been havened for both of those experiences. And she got her life back twice. So I'll let her explain, because she does a lovely job of explaining a little bit about these reports.
So Mark had mentioned before that there are two already published studies on the effectiveness of havening. This was the earliest one in 2015, where they looked at a single session of havening with, I think there were 27 people who had been suffering from depression or anxiety or some other kind of impaired functioning in the workplace and were on disability for 1 to 2 years. And the findings were that after a single session of havening, participants reported an improvement on all mental health measures, which were sustained at 2 months after the havening intervention. So with one havening session, their improvements lasted for the 2-month period when that was the period of time that they had done their check. So that's pretty exciting. That was the earlier of the published studies. And, and this was the most recent one in the Journal of Psychophysiology from just this year, which was a larger study that was done with, I think, over 125 participants, which looked at the impact of one havening session on a type D personality, is basically a personality that seems to be more susceptible to physical and emotional illness. So they, I love this particular chart, which I took from the paper. Here it's showing the effect of havening on diastolic, systolic blood pressure, heart rate, and cortisol. And the findings were that havening reduced heart rate, reduced diastolic and systolic blood pressure and cortisol, both 24 hours after havening, which is at the time point number 2, and even more so a month after havening, which I think is really fantastic. So it's not like this effect kind of goes away in a couple of days. In fact, if anything, the data here is showing that the effect of the havening actually increases over time, which I think is completely exciting. So you can check out these studies as well.
Okay, so those are the two studies. Actually, that's recorded from a session that Elena and I did last year. There's since been the third study by Nottingham Trent University, which shows an immediate reduction in mood states. Sort of medium-sized study of this one, but there are other studies that are waiting to be published at the moment. I've been doing this since 2014, and I was one of the earliest sort of experimenters with havening. And I know it works, but you need to see it work. So to be prove that it's worth having a look at. So we're going to do a little demonstration, and it's not the lady that you can see on the left-hand side saying demonstration today, but this is from a previous demonstration. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to ask you all to turn your cameras off, please, apart from Ewan, who's very kindly offered to be our volunteer for today. So if everybody can turn their camera off, please, apart from Ewan. And there is a facility, and I can't remember.
I think everyone's off now, Mark.
That's brilliant. Actually, we could probably do it like this, but I was just going to try and hide non-video participants.
That's all right, don't worry.
But I can see you, and hopefully you can see me. You probably don't need to see me. You'll be relieved to know. But basically, what I'm going to do, Ewan, we had a very brief chat before, but Ewan and I have never met before. What I asked Ewan is did he have a situation which was a one-off event, because that's the cleanest thing to show in an environment like this. And Ewan very kindly said that he did. Is it something you're happy to talk about, Ewan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you mind explaining in your own words what the situation is, please?
Yeah, of course. So about 16, 17 years ago, Dad and I, just a normal day to school, driving from Exeter to Stone, where I get the bus to go to school. But we actually ended up in quite a nasty side-on-side collision with another car. It caused Dad quite a lot of severe injuries, led him to ICU. He broke his pelvis, broke half his ribs, other severe injuries at the time. Luckily, I was the driver's because I didn't drive that time. I sustained a couple of minor injuries, but I walked away from it. But, at the time, was he gonna, was it surviving and not? Luckily, he survived and he's with us to the day, which is really, really good. He's a lovely man because of it. But yeah, that was after a long road to recovery. It was about 18 months. So 5 months in ICU. We were visiting regularly. And then after that, in a wheelchair for a couple of months, and then slowly got back to, walking and happy and healthy as he is now. If I can go on to the reason why it still kind of caused me a little bit of angst.
Yeah, please do.
I have two roles, so safety consultant by day in construction, but also spent the last decade in the fire and rescue as an on-call firefighter. And when we go to things like that, RTCs, car crashes, if there's, car seat in the back car, it kind of brings it up a little bit in terms of, what's going on. And then when we do some investigations, if you've got someone who's quite young who's involved, it sometimes kind of brings to fruition a little bit, and I've got to bury it behind it. So that's kind of, where I am really.
Does it cause you any particular problems if you're in that situation? If you're approaching a road traffic accident,
it's like a microsecond. Yeah, it kind of like it switches the priorities a little bit for me in terms of, okay, where are they? If are they involved? What injuries have they got? And it kind of even though we have to consider every casualty, it's kind of draws me towards them.
Okay.
And
does it give you any? How do you feel if you're seeing something like that?
It's manageable, but sometimes it can be a little bit emotional, and we've got to think about emotional. We have a job to do. We have an objective to succeed, and it's kind of separating the personal from the professional.
Okay, all right, I understand. Could I ask you to sit a little bit further back from the screen, Ewan, if you wouldn't mind, or just maybe even just tilt the screen? What I'd like to do is be able to see the top part of your body, because part of the process of havening, it's based on neuroscience, but the way that we function as electrochemical beings, okay? And what we're going to use is part of the electro side, which generates some of the chemical side. So I'm not going to get into the detail of that very much today, but there's a really important part that's involved in a moment, which is a very light touch. And if I could ask you just to humor me and just have a go, just follow what I do. So put one hand on one shoulder and one hand on the other, and just stroke down about to your elbows, then lift up and go to the top again and then down. All right. So hopefully you're finding that quite simple, quite straightforward and comfortable enough. You okay with that, Ian?
Yeah, it's fine.
Brilliant. Okay. So that's one of them. There is another option. So you can change these around as you see fit. The other one is putting your hands on your face like that, just on your cheeks, and just gently stroking down. Or indeed, you can go around your forehead like that. Just down like that. Again, should be nice and soothing, just a nice light touch. And the third one is actually the palms together, just moving the palms together like that. And the reason we do all this is that we generate something called a delta wave. Now, if we have time, I'll explain a little bit more about delta waves. But delta waves are just a nice, calming, soothing touch. Now, if you can cast your mind back to being a little boy, Ewan, if you can, a tiny, tiny little boy, and perhaps you fell over at one point and your dad picked you up maybe, or your mum picked you up, and then they went, there, Ewan, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
So we've been doing this for centuries. So nice, soothing touch. Or I will wake up sometimes in the morning and go, oh, my goodness. And again, this calming touch is very nice. What do a lot of people do when something goes wrong? They go, ooh, and they're doing this calming touch. Similarly, people who worry about certain things, what do? They rub their hands together because it's calming. So we've been doing this naturally for a long time. Now we understand why we do it. And this is part of Ron's groundbreaking research. So again, we don't have time to go into all of that today, but I just want you to be ready to do the touch as and when we need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, not just yet, but just to understand the process, in a moment, I'll ask you to think about some very difficult associated memories with that incident. Then I will distract you, so you're not thinking about that anymore. And the brain's not very good at thinking about two things at the same time. So then we move on to much, much nicer things. And this is why havening, again, is a bit of a revolution, because you can actually work on some really nice stuff. As long as it's neutral or positive, you just get distracted, do other things all the time doing the touch. So that's really important. You need to keep on doing the touch all the time. So make sure you're comfortable. And we'll see what happens. All right. So this is the difficult bit, but it only lasts about half a minute. So I will time it. But I'm going to ask you to think about how, well, cast your mind back to the accident that you mentioned earlier. And if you can imagine yourself as you're sitting with your dad in the car, and I want you to imagine, don't worry about rubbing your hands just yet, but I just want you to imagine that you are there at this moment. You're thinking about what's going on. So I want you to imagine that you are there and you feel exactly how you feel or felt at the time. Okay, so anything that you were hearing, seeing, feeling, smelling, anything to do with any of your senses that were capturing that moment, I want you to really, I call it marinating in it. So it's kind of just sit in that marinade, if you like, for half a minute and take your mind back. And this might be difficult. So, I'll just give you a bit of space to think about that. And I'll time it from now. So I'll give you just half a minute. I'll be quiet. And if you can just, maybe you need to shut your eyes to take yourself back there, but just think about that for the next half a minute, if you would, please, Ewan. Just remember how that made you feel at the time, if you can. Okay, thank you for doing that, Ewan. If you were to score on a scale of 10, so 10 is really absolutely horrendous, 0, it means nothing to you, what number would your score be, do you think?
8.
Okay. So clear your mind. And what did you have for breakfast today, Ewan?
Cereal.
Cereal. What kind of cereal did you have?
Granola.
Granola. Oh, okay. Sort of crunchy and with other stuff thrown in, sort of a few raisins or something else?
Yeah. Yes.
Excellent. All right. If I ask you, put one hand on one shoulder, one on the other, and just stroke downwards and just keep on doing that all the time that we're talking until I ask you to stop. And you mentioned earlier that you like rock climbing.
Yeah.
So what do you need to take with you if you're going to go rock climbing?
We'll go in PPE as always. There's a lot of
Of course.
would know.
Health and safety, we must be absolutely tip top on that.
No, climbing shoes, chalk bag, harness, helmets. If I'm going with someone else who hasn't more experience, then we're looking at carabiners and gear to put in the rocks as we're climbing.
Okay, excellent. So if I was to ask you to name 10 things that you would have to pack in a little backpack to take with you, what would they be?
I'd go waterproof, windproof jacket. I'd also go snacks. I get quite hungry.
Okay.
So 2 water bottles. Shoes, shorts. It's a sunny day. Climbing shoes. First aid kit, because when we fall, sometimes with injuries. Harness. Carabiners. Belay or a pencil ID to belay someone.
Okay.
Said climbing helmet, climbing rope.
Brilliant. Okay. You got loads of things in your backpack. I'm kind of losing count here. I think we're up to about 15 now, but that's okay. Okay, and I understand. Keep on straightening your arms all the time. I understand that you love to do a bit of mountaineering, sort of lakes and in the peaks.
Yes.
So I want you to imagine that you are there. You got all the gear, all the safety gear in particular, and you are ready to go. You're looking up the. Imagine that you're there now. You're looking up to the top of the rock face, and you've got to start making some moves. How are you feeling?
I think confident, but also nervous. Don't know what the conditions are like. In terms of how far you're going to push yourself. You've got to know how to fall. All
right. Well, in that case, we're going to make this nice and easy. By the magic of just because we can, you're now magically at the top of the mountain. All right, and you are looking down, and you've just done the most fantastic climb in your life. I want you to imagine that you are surveying. In your mind's eye, where are you looking down onto?
Down from the actual, either the top of the rock face, looking down over the kind of the lovely hills of the Peak District, or the lovely hills of also either the lakes, or looking at Windermere or something like that. Okay,
well, let's imagine you're at Windermere and you're looking down. I've had the privilege of doing a bit of that. So you're looking down at Windermere, absolutely fantastic sight. And I want you to just feel a great sense of elation. And, you've just done a brilliant climb. You've really enjoyed it. It's a beautiful day. And I want you to just drop your stuff down by your side and just walk along the top of the cliff, not right by the edge, so you're nice and safe. Walk along the top of the cliff and just take in the view. And I want you to imagine that as you're walking around and taking that view, every step that you take, you're feeling just a little bit lighter, a little bit more comfortable, and just absolutely elated and energized. So I'd like you to say out loud for me, if you would, please. Just take 20 steps around, and each step that you take, you're feeling just a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable, safe, and happy. So if you can just go 1 to 20 for me, if you would.
I think breathtaking, a bit of joy, a bit of kind of achievement, relief that you got up there and actually getting over it, not falling, the sense of just nature and the calming effects it has, and just being out there and just able to kind of switch off, trust in both your person that you've done it with and also the kit that you actually done it with, and a sense of kind of joy and admiration to yourself and the other person who's done it with you.
Yeah, a bit of a pat on your back. Yeah. Absolutely. Brilliant. All right, fantastic. Just going to take a little pause there. So just relax and just stay still for a moment, if you would. And I'd like you to think back to that original accident. So just think about that again. Imagine that you're there. And when we spoke earlier, you said it's probably about an 8 out of 10 in terms of level of distress. What would you give that number now?
Let's say a 5.
5.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So I'm just mindful of time. I promised to you yesterday that we probably wouldn't be able to do everything and get rid of all of it within the confines of the time. But how are you feeling having just dropped that from 8 to 5?
No, it's really good. It's kind of like accepting and taking on board. It's been useful.
Thank you. The beautiful thing about this as well is that it's permanent. So what we've actually done, or what you've done, is that you have made an electrochemical change to your system. And if we had a little bit more time, I would spend more time going through actually how it works. And that's what we do on a sort of practitioner training session, so that people understand how it works and they can use it on their own clients. But it's you've just had a tiny little exposure to it. We'll get everybody to have a little go later on with just a minor anxiety, no severe trauma, please, because this isn't the time or place to do it. But thank you ever so much for doing that, Ewan. And we'll check in on you at the end and see how you're feeling, because as Elena said earlier, often we find that actually the effects get deeper as time goes on, even from a tiny little intervention that we've done there. And how long was that? You know, not very long at all.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share my screen again. So I'll bring my slides back. Thanks ever so much for doing that, Ewan. We'll talk again later, no doubt. So let me just share my screen again. And so that's Steph, who was very upset when we first met her. I'll show you a later picture of her a bit later on, but let me talk a little bit more about havening, and I just need to close the screen down so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. Now, you mentioned about twins earlier, Ewan. We happen to have a couple of twins here. The strange thing about trauma and how we're affected by events in our life is that one person will experience, see, or even hear about the same thing, perhaps alongside somebody else. One may be traumatized and one may not. And there are reasons for that. And we don't have too much time to go into that today, but one of them is Ron Rudin in his book, When the Past is Always Present, fantastic title. He came up with this theory about, and it's shortened to Emily, which is about an event that you experience. It has a particular meaning to you, and depending on the landscape of your brain at the time, and if there is a feeling of inescapability, then you are going to be traumatized by the experience. If none of those apply, then you won't be. And he also came out with another side of this, which is what happens through the encoding process in your brain, that there are various things that happen. So you have cognitive thoughts, you have autonomic reactions in your body, you have somatosensory effects sometimes, and there is the emotion as well. And what we do with havening is we take the emotion away from the situation. So you don't forget that something happened, but it doesn't have that emotional residue that it might have done before. And there are other effects that basically don't pass the message down the next set of neurons. So a lot of the other things don't happen as well. So imagine that we've got a screen in front of you. Imagine you've got a mobile phone. So most people might be familiar with this if you're doing a video on a mobile phone. So that's what this is supposed to represent. And by the way, if you've ever been involved in a bank raid, you might want to look away now, because I'm going to show aspects of a bank raid. So just a bit of a heads up on that. So let's imagine that this scene is unfurling in front of you. You've got a guy in a bank who's threatening you with a pistol. Now, this bank robber is wearing a balaclava. He's got a pistol. The pistol is what we call the fear-producing content. The balaclava is what we call complex content. So it's content related, but not actually the direct fear-producing element, which is the gun. Now, if you're a baby, you don't know that it's something to worry about, but as an adult, then we do. There's also the context, so the surroundings. So we've got the bank design. So we've got lots of reflective glass, we've got lots of wood, maybe there's a fan going on, maybe there's a particular music playing at the time, maybe there's a smell of a nice orchid in the background or something. So all of these things are trapped by the amygdala, which is the emotional center of the brain, and it's encapsulated as part of the encoding process if this is a traumatic experience for you. So what you get is you get sensory input coming through all of your different senses into a part of the brain called thalamus, which we kind of brand the sorting office. It sends signals in a couple of different directions, and these are in milliseconds. So the emotional content goes straight through to the amygdala with what's called a gamma wave going at up to 100 hertz, to 100 waves a second. And there's complex content and context, which goes through to the cortex, the thinking part of your brain. The amygdala is very much the reaction, fight or flight controller. And I'm not going to go too much into the science today, but what actually happens is there are things called AMPA receptors on the postsynaptic surface of the amygdala, the lateral amygdala. And working together with the cortex, we have those elements that I mentioned briefly earlier. We have outputs. So there are cognitive thoughts, there are autonomic reactions. So this might be your pupils changing, your heart rate, and your all sorts of different things within your body changing. Somatosensory, you might have something that's hurt at the time. If somebody hurt you, let's say it was a violent attack and not a pistol, then you would have a feeling in your hand, or if you bashed your hand through trying to run away from the threat. And there's the emotion tied up there as well. So all of this happens often literally in the blink of an eye. You need those 4 conditions I mentioned earlier, which we summarize as Emily. There's this complex physiological response to the event. And then in the future, if something like it, so it could be the smell of the orchid that was in that bank, it could be all that wood around, you might feel a bit uneasy about lots of wood around you, wood paneling. It could be lots of reflective glass, you don't feel comfortable with that. It could be somebody wearing a balaclava. You just think, oh, I feel a bit uneasy about that bloke, but I don't know why. Or maybe you do. So all of this has been synaptically encoded. Your response to it is already there to save you, because that's all that your body's trying to do. It's there for the future. It's always biologically active, which is why that book is called The Past is Always Present. Fantastic title. Now, havening is wonderful because it does 2 things, or it can do 2 things. First of all, for traumatic experiences, it can douse the fires in the amygdala, if you like. So take away the distress that's associated with something that happened before. But also, it is brilliant as a coaching tool. So to coach away barriers that people might have. I work with people, for example, who don't like presentations, and take away the emotional fear to do with that, or they don't think they can achieve a certain goal, or they don't think they're able to do something in a certain time frame. And coaching people through that with havening is very, very effective. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to all get involved and do exactly what Ewan was doing earlier. So there are the 3 options. So you can rub your arms and shoulders, you can rub your hands, or you can just gently stroke your cheeks. And what I'd like you to do, please, is nothing deeply traumatic, because this really isn't the environment for that. I checked with Ewan that he was okay with what we're going to do, and we've kind of just compartmentalized that a little bit. But for the moment, I'd like you to just take an issue that bothers you right now. Nothing deeply traumatic, but something maybe a little bit of a niggle, something that you don't feel comfortable with. Maybe you're not getting on with somebody at work, or there's something happening in your private life that you don't feel comfortable with at the moment. At the moment, there's a lot of exams going on for young people, or people are taking, postgraduate exams, whatever they might be, or professional exams. So there's something you're worried about on a topic, or maybe you're going for a promotion, or you've got a big presentation to do, anything like that. And what I'd like you to do, please, is just to think about that for a moment, and we're going to do exactly what we did with Ewan. So I'm going to ask you just to perhaps shut your eyes and to think about how it makes you feel. So again, I'm just going to give you about half a minute to do that. So just from now, concentrate on the situation that is concerning you right now. Feel the discomfort. It might be in a particular part of your body, might have butterflies in your stomach, might have a tightness in your chest, might have sweaty palms. And just think about how it makes you feel. And this isn't the comfortable bit, this is the only uncomfortable bit really with havening. Just feel that discomfort for a moment. And then if you would, just give it a number, and perhaps write the number down, because we'll come back to that a little bit later on. So remember that scale we used before, this is what we call subjective unit of distress. So 10 would be absolutely horrendous. I hope nobody's there, because that's not what we're trying to do at the moment. But 10 would be awful. 0, it means nothing to you. So there's no emotional connection to it at all. So you'll be somewhere between 0 and 10. And just make a note of that if you would for a moment. And again, just clear your head, and I want you to think of what's 11 times 11? Now, I'm not expecting people to answer. You can shout to the screen if you're on mute, that's fine. But I'm just going to go through a couple of things to make you just think about some really pleasant stuff. So think about somewhere that you love to go. Where is your favorite place in the world? And I want you to imagine that you are there right now and you're walking along. It's a beautiful day. You're really enjoying yourself. You're feeling nice and peaceful and calm. Just walking along. I want you to take a few steps forward. And as you take your first step, you feel, just a little bit lighter. And the second one, just a little bit more relaxed. And the third one, just keep on walking in your mind's eye and stroking your arms, your face, your hands, all the times you do this, please. So just keep on stroking and walking along and really taking in everything that's around you. In your mind's eye, you can probably see some beautiful scenery or people that you love. And it's really calming. Some beautiful colors, landscapes. Just keep on walking through there, feeling a little bit lighter every single step that you take. Keep walking through and imagine yourself there right now, losing any tightness in your shoulders, feeling more and more relaxed every single step that you take. And all the time you're feeling a little bit more energized, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more comfortable, peaceful, happy, and safe. Just enjoy walking around, taking it all in your mind's eye. Just enjoy this peaceful experience as you walk through. Feel at peace, very, very calm. Keep walking, feel lighter. Now we'll just do something slightly differently. I want you to think about any animal you can possibly think of, and I'm being very broad in the terms of animal. Keep on stroking your arms all the time, stroking your face or your hands. And I want you to think of, starting with the letter A, I'd like an animal beginning with A, please. That could be ant, it can be aardvark, it could be anything you like. And now B, what have you got for B? So it could be a badger, it could be buffalo, anything you like. C, many people go for cat, or maybe you've gone for cougar, who knows. D, what have you got for D? Obvious one is dog, but maybe you come up with something a little bit more exotic. E, most people go for elephant. What about F? Perhaps you've got fox, or perhaps you've got something completely different. What about G? Giraffe, maybe. And H, well, that could be a hippo, maybe. I, people often struggle on I, but they usually get around to a kind of lizardy thing called an iguana. J, well, that could be a jackal, or anything else you like. K, people stop and think a bit, and then they usually go for kangaroo. What about L? People often go for a lemur. What about M? Could be a monkey. N. You think of anything beginning with N? Animals? I'm struggling myself right now. What's N? Probably shouting one right now at me. I'm going to move on to O because I can't think of anything. O, octopus. What about P? Parrot. Q. Difficult one, Q. But there are a few. Kind of a chicken-y type thing. Yes, you got it. Quail. There we go. R, rabbit. S, stoat. T. What about T? I can't think of a T. You can probably think of a T. I'm going to say thunderbird. I don't even know if that's a proper bird, but I'll call it thunderbird. You can have imaginary ones here too. Yes, a unicorn. Anyway, we'll park it for the moment. And what I'd like you to do, please, just gently stop stroking your arms or your face or your hands, whichever one you've been doing. And I want you to think back to the situation that you started with. So whatever it was that was bothering you earlier, and just have a think back to that and think about your score. So 10 was horrendous, 0 means nothing to you. And I've asked you to put it in the chat, please, actually, if you would. What was your score to start with? So 0 to 10, so 10 being the high one. And what's your score now? So 10 being the high one again. Hopefully your number has either stayed the same, because we've not quite hit the mark for some reason or another, or it's reduced. So just be honest. I'll be interested to talk to anybody whose number hasn't reduced or at least stayed the same. But we'll come back to those a little bit later on. So whilst you're putting those into the chat, I'll just carry on and just talk about why on earth would this be applicable to health and safety? Well, this is a report back in 2018 on return on investment. Now, I'm sure a lot of you here have plenty of information about why health and safety at work.
Oh, mute would work, yes.
Right, I'm unmuted again. So there's plenty of good data that says investing in certain things has a brilliant return on investment, and that includes mental health. In fact, Deloitte are at the bottom of this screen here. They produced a groundbreaking study a few years ago of their own. But let's talk about health and safety in particular. Now, people might be off work immediately if they're involved in an accident at work or witness an accident at work, and for one reason or another they get traumatized. Think about the impact on that individual, that they can't work. Maybe they need some time off to recuperate, to recover. And then there's all their workmates who now have that burden of the work that should have been done in the meantime. Maybe there's health and safety implications. Things can't happen because a certain key individual isn't there. And then the family that are involved in all of those different individuals, you can have loss of skilled staff, disruption, delays, whatever your business is, whether it's a service, whether it's production, there's going to be a financial impact of some kind of, get somebody to cover, maybe that's temporary staff, train people up to the same level, maybe the person's off sick for a long time. Because of the drop in service, you lose your customers, you get disillusioned employees, get disillusioned customers, and demotivation all around. Maybe have to recruit new people, retrain new people, and this all takes money. Thousands upon thousands of pounds, maybe hundreds of thousands of pounds in some instances. Maybe there's insurance compensation, who knows, all sorts of different things. And my question to you is, what can you get for £200? Well, £200 could have an intervention just like you've seen earlier, online, with somebody who helps somebody immediately get back to work, as I've done on many, many occasions. So fantastic for immediate responses, but also longer term issues. I said I would show you a different picture of Steph earlier. Now, Steph is the lady who very kindly volunteered at a session I had last year. And she unfortunately lost her husband 15 years earlier, but she had this perpetual cloud of sadness over her. And I won't go through all the detail of what we did, but we did a live session. It took about 40 minutes. And even then we got her SUD level, which I think was about 8 to start with, down to, I think it was about 3 within about 40 minutes. So I promised Steph that offline I would help her. And the picture below is when we did a second session about a week later. And true to my promise, I worked with her and we got rid of any last remaining emotional residue. If you want to see what Steph thought, there is a video that I can point you to where you can just see her reaction. She told you the story herself. So there's all sorts of different options to use with havening. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because I think it's probably an opportunity to take some questions. So I know we've got about 8 minutes or so left. So, Bernard, I don't know who's going to ask the questions or how you want to channel the questions, but whilst you're working that out, I'm just going to go to the chat to see what thoughts are. So, oh, here we go. So, Sukhpreet, we've got 8 to a 6, Paul 3 to 0, Lindsay 7 to 5, Ewan 8 to 5, Sarah 6 to 4, 5 to 3 for Paul, John 8 to 6, 7 to 4 for Liz, 8 to 5 for Ian, 8 to 6 for Sarah, 6 to 4 for Claire, 7 to 5 for Zoe, 7 to 5 for Bernard, 5 to 2 for Angela, and I think that's everybody that's put their comment in there. So I'm delighted that everybody who's put their number in has got some benefit. Any questions, please? Very happy to answer them.
Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes we can spend on the questions, so you can put in the chat box with prefix Q or just unmute yourself.
Hi, Mark. I was going to ask a question, actually.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I just wondered, is this something that you, and obviously you've talked about like one-off kind of instances, but is this something that you could use that causes you regular discomfort, you know, for something that causes you a regular discomfort?
Yes. Yeah. There's always a reason why something causes you discomfort. We had the example of the bank robber earlier. You might have, you may not have, but somebody might have a problem with balaclavas, and that'll be directly related to that situation, even if somebody doesn't even understand or recognize that themselves. And a lot of this is in childhood, as a lot of you will understand. And we may have no idea where certain things come from. And actually our brain often shuts out horrible events, so we can't even think of it. So some people that are abused in early life, for example, don't even know that they've been abused, but they just have a response to certain things. But it might be, and this is where phobias come in, for example. I work a lot with people who have phobias, and these are a form of traumatization. So you mentioned something that concerns you all the time. Let's say, for argument's sake, it's a phobia. Well, that might be because maybe as a child, let's say it was a spider phobia. I worked with one person who, unfortunately, when they were a child, they were lying in bed at night and they woke up and there was a spider on their face. And they were traumatized by that experience. And unfortunately, there was a sequence of other experiences because they'd been previously traumatized that made them more susceptible to having a bit of an abreaction to seeing spiders. And they got worse and worse and worse. And so they had a couple of instances where they're trying to get away from a spider, they fell off the edge of the bed, cracked their head open, all sorts of horrible things. So, or there may be other things that are associated with it that, again, we're not conscious of. But the mind, the amygdala, traps all of this. It's always vigilant. Right now, your brain is scanning. The amygdala is scanning every single person on this call. It's scanning right now, looking for threats to your life. And that's all it's there for. And it encodes all of this to protect you for the future. So I've had the weirdest phobias sometimes. I helped a lad with a lawnmower phobia, for example. You think, lawnmower phobia? Well, he was, Nottingham Forest, it's in the news right now, just been promoted back to the Premier League. But a few years ago, I worked with a 14-year-old lad who was showing great promise at the academy. And but he ran away when he heard a lawnmower. So if the groundsman was cutting the grass, he would just run away. Not very good for his footballing career. So if the groundsman was cutting the grass. So I went and saw him. I was in the kitchen with his mum. This is what he was about. He was 14 when I spoke to him. But 10 years earlier, it transpired. He had witnessed, so second-hand trauma, he'd witnessed his brother be burnt on the leg by a hot motorbike exhaust. He'd been wearing shorts at the time, saw his brother lean against this bike, which somebody was revving it up, going vroom, vroom, making a noise like a lawnmower. There were fumes coming out of it, like a lawnmower, and there was a bit of movement, like a lawnmower. And so he trapped a fear of motorbikes, which he told me about later. He said, "Oh, did I not tell you I had a problem with motorbikes?" I said, "No, that kind of works." but he also trapped anything like it. And so he had no idea that it was down to this 10-year-old experience, or 10 years previously. And yeah, so it's really strange how all of this will be trapped. The reason people have fear of heights, we have a natural disinclination to get too close to heights, but that's a natural thing that we're born with to prevent us being hurt. But some people develop a really awful phobia about heights, and that will be for, they'll have had a difficulty of some kind, perhaps. Does that answer your question, Sarah? I've rambled on a bit. Sorry. Any other questions at all, please?
I think Angela raising the hand.
Oh, you're on mute, Angela.
I am as well, aren't I? Sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you. Yeah, I did put this in the chat box to Bernard, actually. Thank you, Mark. That was brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's your voice as well. You've got that sort of calm, lovely voice that just works with this kind of thing.
Oh, I'm going to blush in a moment.
Oh, sometimes I get wound up about presentations, particularly now, sort of being vice president. You have to sort of talk to global people, and I'm only a consultant from the backwoods in East Anglia, so it sort of does sort of
lovely part of the world.
It is actually, yeah. But doing your thing there, I went from 5 to 2, really
Excellent.
got me relaxed. Also quite sleepy.
There's a reason for that.
I was going to say, that was my question. Is there a physical reason for that as well?
Well, kind of is the abbreviated answer. When we generate these delta waves, which are from the stroking motion, we normally experience delta waves in deep sleep. It's non-REM, so not when we're dreaming, so not when we got eye movements. It's deeper than that. And what your body thinks is that, oh, I've got these delta waves, so I must have been asleep. So I'll feel a bit tired then. So it's kind of associated with the fact that you're generating delta waves and you feel tired. You come out of it quite quickly, actually. So you'll feel, in half an hour, you'll be fine. Maybe a lot quicker than that. But it's quite common. But there is an added advantage, actually. If you wake up in the middle of the night for some reason, something's bothering you, you may not even know what it is. How would it be if you can go back to sleep again quite quickly? Well, Havening can help you there because, and you've got to be careful you're in bed with somebody else, of course. So, you can't necessarily do this next to somebody. You're going to, ruffle the sheets and maybe move the mattress up and down. But what you can do is gently do that. Or you could do that. And you'll start generating those delta waves. And I have a lot of people that have helpfully and usefully got themselves back to sleep, partly because of that. So, again, use the process I've used earlier. So you're perhaps thinking about something that's bothered you. Stop thinking about it. Think about something nice. Distract yourself, whether it's, A to Z of animals, or whether it's being your favorite holiday place and you're walking on the sandy beach or in a wooded glade or wherever you like to be, and do the Havening touch. And this one, by the way, when you do the cheeks, it's a lot higher delta wave production. And
one I was using, actually.
Okay, well,
I was on a Greek island.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I never start with people's face normally, because I've seen people shudder, and that it is electricity. It's but the impact can be quite remarkable for some people. So yeah, this is the lowest. That's about 5 times resting rate of delta waves. So you're producing delta waves now, but nothing like what you'll be doing in deep sleep. And delta waves are very, very at a very low level at the moment when you're awake. So I hope that answers your question. It's kind of convoluted answer, but that's part of the reason. Yeah.
Ewan, I think you've got hand raised.
Yeah, I did. No, it's really good. No, thank you, Mark. And being guinea pig was really good. No, it was a really kind of good session. Just in terms of when you say, a lot of this comes from child kind of trauma, and my example was very much a child trauma. Yeah. Is it the same when like an adult trauma would face the same kind of deep impact? And
yes, yeah. Unfortunately, we're all capable of being traumatized right now. If the circumstances are right, if there's an event that has a particular threatening meaning to us, the landscape of our brain is such that we are more susceptible to traumatization, and we feel as though we can't escape whatever it is that's threatening us. Those are the 4 components for traumatization. Now, the landscape of the brain is really important, and I go back to the twins that I showed on the picture earlier.
Yeah.
Let's imagine those twins are now teenage girls, okay? And one of the teenage girls, she just split up with a boyfriend. She's really upset and inconsolable at the moment. So the landscape of her brain at this point in time is more susceptible to traumatization. Whereas the other twin is doing fine, she's really happy, and she's not got some kind of external pressure that makes her more liable to traumatization like a sister. So again, when you become a practitioner, you learn a lot more about the components for traumatization, and you learn to become a really good detective. So asking questions about, so what happened here and what happened there, if people can remember, if it's a conscious thing. And if they can't, then we dig at it from slightly different angles. So there's lots of different types of havening techniques. What we've worked on today is event havening. So there are a whole host of other havening techniques that can be used.
Brilliant, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Mark. I'm mindful of time as well, so I believe you can get in touch with Staffordshire branch for more questions if anybody's got any, and then Mark, we can obviously catch up afterwards.
Sure.
Because it's 3 minutes gone, 1:30. So thank you very much, Mark. Very insightful and informative.
Pleasure.
Informative presentation. So thank you for spending this lunchtime with Staffordshire branch and our members. Ewan, thank you very much for volunteering today and sharing your
thanks
experience.
so much, Ewan and Bernard. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you very much. And yes, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to branch committee members for organizing it, as usual, working behind the scene on this virtual event.
Especially Trudy, thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you to our members. Please follow us on LinkedIn. Watch out for next events as well. Next one is on the 13th of June. So 13th of June, Monday, 6:30 in the evening. So some promotions already gone out, and will be branch mailer to follow. So once again, thank you very much, and we will see you soon.
Thanks so much, Bernard. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Cheers
you.
for now.
Can I ask committee members just to stay for a minute? And Mark, if you got 1 minute.
Yeah, of course. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Looks like quite an international audience there.
Yes. Just looking on that. You're quicker than me removing people, Liz.
She's got it on her today, hasn't she? She's in.
Oh my God! Have you not noticed that I've had to go and deal with them? Really, really naughty today, actually.
I thought people were leaving of their own accord.
No, we put them back in the waiting.
Yeah, I think
we're okay, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, that's everybody. So thanks everyone. So Mark, thank you again for presenting today and demonstrating. Ewan, great job, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for volunteering. And obviously, Trudy, Liz, Jolie, Lisa, thank you for helping out as usual. So I don't want to stop you any longer. So yes, thank you, Mark. We'll get a record.